Hello, it's Mr. Shine here from HearthstonePlayers.com. So recently I made a video that went through a good portion of the newest Goblins vs. Gnomes expansion cards. Since that time I have gotten behind. There are a lot of cards and they keep coming out like multiple times a day. In fact, I think today there were like 3 of them or something like that. So I'm having a hard time keeping up, but I will try to compile a whole bunch of them now and give a general gist of them. I think I'll do something fairly similar to my last video, give them some basic rankings. So let us get started, jump right into the fray. Ancestor's Call is the newest Shaman card, puts a random minion from each player's hand into the battlefield, and it costs 4 mana to do this. My initial thought and my lasting thought is that this card is not very good. The reason I think this card is not very good is because it costs 4 mana and then you put a card in hand from your hand into play. You don't always know what card that is going to be unless you only have 1 minion in your hand. And of course, depending on the opponent you're playing, you could be in a lot of trouble if you give them a card that is a late game card if they are a control deck or something like that. This card seems like it could have some combo potential if you have a lot of late game minions that you want to bring out early on turn 4, but it also seems like it's a very high risk card and it costs a lot of mana, that 4 mana and a card, to also throw another card into play. I think of this card similar to Voidcaller, which takes, which is a 3/4 minion for 4 that has a death rattle that brings a demon from your hand into play. And that card I think is much better because it gives you a minion, whereas this is just the effect pretty much. It is a shaman, so there are some other ways to utilize, certainly a card that if it would see any play it will be constructed. But I don't think that there is enough value to make it something we will see very often. Maybe gimmicks, kind of like Alarmobot. Maybe Alarmobot Ancestor's Call decks could just be a huge ramp shaman, but I don't think that's probably going to be likely. Anodized RoboCup. This is a druid card, and it's a 2-drop. It's kind of like the perfect 2-drop. It has Taunt. It gives you a 2/2 that has the option of being a 3/2 or a 2/3. I assume that this acts very similarly to Druid of the Claw in that the buff becomes a permanent part of the card, not that it has a effect that can be silenced. If it can be silenced, it's a little bit worse, but I doubt that's going to be the case. In either way, this card is very flexible because you have the option to make it whatever it needs to be in the early game, and it will pretty much trade with any other thing in the early game. I think this card is much more of an arena card because you need a lot of 2-drops in the arena. It is not something you would use in a ramp deck for Druid because ramp is mostly focused on a lot of late game minions, but I think it might have some potential in a token deck or more of a mid-ranged early game based Druid deck. I don't see anything wrong with the card, so I think it's good. It's not bad. Yeah, it's good. Antique Healbot. This is a neutral mech minion for 5 mana, which brings a 3/3, so that alone is not very good, but the battle cry is quite interesting, restoring 8 health to your hero. It's alongside of Healing Touch, it's alongside of Lay on Hands, so there's a lot of health from 8 that can go there, and that's really kind of an anti-aggro deck tech card. I think it can see play in both Arena and Constructed. If someone overreached in their hand and burned some of their resources to get you very low, and you have an Antique Healbot, you may just win the game outright at that point if they don't have a way to deal that 8 damage afterwards. So I like it. I think it's going to be very useful for control-based decks or other anti-aggro decks. I think it will see play, although it will not see extensive play. It's not a card you want to put in every deck because, of course, again, 3/3 for 5, not too great. Alright, this one came out fairly recently. The Burly Rockjaw Trog, a 3/5 for 4. And the ability is whenever your opponent casts a spell, it gets 2 attack, and I believe that is the permanent attack. So if your opponent casts a spell, it becomes a 5/5, 7/5, 9/5, keeps going until it's dead. I think this card is good. Some people were saying that it's like a super Yeti, or it will replace a Yeti. I don't think that's the case, and of course I'm referring to the arena when I say Yeti. I don't think that is the case though. I think it's a little worse than people might be making it out to be. Not to say that it's bad, but I do think that if your opponent is going to trade into it, they will be able to run a minion into it first, dealing with a 3 attack, and then they will play a spell to follow up. There are things like Mortal Coil, for example, deal 4 damage, then Mortal Coil to kill it. There are spells like Soulfire to deal 1 damage, and then Soulfire to kill it. There's a lot of ways to remove using a spell afterwards when the attack damage doesn't really matter. It is also still susceptible to Shadow Word Pain because it's a 3/5 when it's targeted, and then after the spell goes into effect, it turns into a 5/5, but it's already being hit by the spell and is going to die. Again, I don't think it is bad, and if you are able to have a board in the first place or protect it, and your opponent wants to deal with it, it can be hard and it can get some good value as kind of a 5/5 or more than that. But I don't think it's going to be the bee's knees. I don't think it's going to be something that's overly insane in the game, although it'll be good. I would definitely pick it in the arena, and it might have some use in Constructed in some ways. Call Pet is the newest Hunter card. For 2 mana, you draw a card, and if it's a beast that you draw, it costs 4 less. So this card seems like it could be a card that is geared towards Control Hunter, and I'll get to that in a second because there are some other cards I'll touch base on. But it is not a card that you would see in a normal Hunter deck now, because most minions except for high mains cost under that. I think most are like 2 or 3 for most of the mid-range Hunter decks. But this card, if you want to have, I mean, it would be crippling if you were able to draw a high main and then have it cost 2 mana in a following turn. A 2 mana high main is craziness. And the fact that it cycles itself by drawing a card is pretty nice. I don't think this card is insane. I don't think this card is a card that will see much arena play because it's kind of a 2 mana cycle, which is a bit expensive. But if you have a heavy beast deck theme in your Constructed Hunter, it could be pretty awesome. Cobalts Guardian. So this is an interesting Paladin card, a 6/3 that whenever you summon a mech, you gain Divine Shield. It costs 5 mana, and it's also a mech. This is certainly a card that you would imagine you'd want to use in a mech synergy-based deck for Paladin, maybe another mid-range type. And I think this is a card that if you are able to keep it on the board, it can be real strong. It's something that needs to be dealt with by the opponent before you can let it continuously get 6 damage trades with Divine Shield if you have a whole bunch of mechs in your deck. Again, it's hard to say what sort of deck or how this is going to play out because we have so many unknowns at this point in time. How good are mechs going to be? How many decks will upheave the meta and be something completely different? It's certainly not a Control Paladin deck card that we know of right now, but I think as a standalone itself, if you're able to combine it with a decent deck and Constructed, it could be real good. I don't think it's going to be that great in the arena because you might not be able to build a deck around mechs, but if you are able to keep it on the board, it still becomes a threat that the opponent needs to deal with. Otherwise, they're going to deal with a Divine Shield 6/3. The next one is a Paladin weapon, Cog Hammer. It costs 3 mana, it's a 2/3, and its battle cry is give a random friendly minion Divine Shield and Taunt. This card is going to be good in both Constructed and the arena. I think this is very strong. It fills a nice niche as a mid-range weapon before you have a True Silver Champion, or if you don't have a True Silver Champion after this. 2/3 for 3 as a weapon is not that great, but it's really that battle cry that makes it very strong. If you have 1 minion on the board, you can immediately give it Divine Shield, you can taunt it up if it's a big minion, it can help give a trade for something else, and it can help clear some other medium things. This is really a card that I think Paladin was lacking in terms of an early game threat for some small mid-range opponent enemy threats. It's a little slow because of the 2 damage, but I think that I would take this certainly in arena many times. It has a lot of potential to get you some good value, and I'm really looking forward to the Cog Hammer. I'm also looking forward to the Fel Cannon, a 4 mana Warlock mech, a 3/5, and at the end of your turn it deals 2 damage to a non-mech minion. So the downside of this card is it deals 2 damage to a non-mech minion, which could be your non-mech minion, which would be very bad. But the good side is that if you build a deck around this, like a Warlock-themed mech deck, you can deal that 2 damage to one of your opponent's cards, and it happens at the end of your turn, so it happens right away, whereas the 1/4 Demolisher deals the 2 damage on the next turn. So this card is, again, it's hard to say how this is going to work out when we don't know what decks could come out of this, but I think standalone, a 3/5 for 4 that has this upside to deal 2 damage, maybe kill something in the early game, I see it being very good. I do see it being very good in the arena as well, even though it does have the potential to deal damage to your own mechs. If you are able to play it at a right time on a good board, you probably will kill one of their minions, and that can really set you up for a better position. Okay, now we're getting to some legendary cards. This one is a neutral mech for 8 mana, the Foe Reaper 4000, a 6/9 that has a very interesting, a very unique ability. It damages the minions that are next to whatever it attacks. So I assume it's kind of like a cleave, the first cleave that Hearthstone has had. It's hard to say how good this card is going to be. I actually don't think it's going to be that great, although it will be pretty strong in the arena to drop it down. Since it has 9 HP, it's really difficult to deal with outside of hard removal. And if it gets a chance to attack, you pretty much win the game, because dealing 6 damage to 3 targets that you can choose, 3 for 1s right away, and it probably will even survive that attack. If you give it Wind Fury or something like that, I shudder to think of the potential. But essentially it's something that needs a turn to go into effect and gives your opponent a turn to react. And it costs 8 mana, so it is pretty steep for that sort of thing to happen. We are moving to the Rogue now. This is the Goblin Auto Barber, a 2 mana 3/2 that has a battle cry that gives your weapon +1 attack. This is also a mech. And I think this card is also going to be incredibly strong in the arena. When you think of tempo plays that the Rogue has, especially with the coin, they already have Defias Ringleader, they already have SI7 Agent, they have Backstab, they have a lot of ways to grab hold of the board in the early game and establish tempo. This Goblin Auto Barber is more of the same. On turn 2, you can coin out a weapon, or if you have the coin, you can coin out a weapon on turn 1, and then on turn 2 you can play the Goblin Auto Barber and immediately have a 2/2 weapon on the board, which is very strong for dealing with early 3/2 drops. It has a lot of other potential as well. If you have an Assassin's Blade, you can make it a 4/5 weapon, which can put down a lot of hurt. And of course, if you have Deadly Poisons, you can make things even stronger. It can help buff Blade Flurries. It is something that I would imagine would not be seen in a Miracle Rogue deck, but it certainly could be seen in a Tempo Rogue deck. And again, in the arena, I would pick this many times as an early 2-drop for the Rogue. So Goblin Sapper is a neutral minion for 3 mana. It's a 2/4. And its ability is that it gets +4 attack if your opponent has 6 or more cards in hand. So a little bit more anti-hand lock, anti-control synergy here, but I think it's kind of interesting and a nice little touch here. So it can essentially be a 6/4 for 3 mana, which is quite strong, as I'm sure you know. This is a card that also could work maybe in mill decks. If you were able to throw a bunch of crap in the opponent's hand, you have a 6/4 that needs to be dealt with and is quite a threat for pretty cheap. It's just a 2/4 by itself, which I think is actually in this current state of the cards that we know we have in our regular decks and the expansion of, or the Adventure Mode Naxxramas. A 2/4 is pretty good as a 3-drop. It's a little more difficult to deal with. So I think in general this is a good card just because it has a lot of upside, and at the worst case it's still a 2/3 or 2/4 for 3, which has some use. It's yet to be seen how many decks it will play into, but I don't see anything wrong with this card. The Illuminator is also another 2/4 minion for 3 mana that has an ability, but I think the ability is a little bit worse than the Goblin Sapper. If you control a secret at the end of your turn, you restore 4 health to your hero. So this is certainly a card then that in Constructed would only be seen in a Paladin, a Hunter, or in a Mage, because they are the cards, the classes that have secrets. But I don't even think it's going to be that fantastic in many of them. It might be in like a Control Mage or a Control Hunter, for example. Again, more things that are leaning towards a Control Hunter. If you need a little bit of extra health towards the end, it does happen at the end of your turn, so it's kind of nice to get that 4 health right away if you have a secret. But I don't know if it's really a big threat, and it's hard to say that it's something that I'm going to see a lot of in the game. It could have, if it's going to be around, it will have a deck that is built around it to keep you sustained a little bit. The Iron Sensei is a 3 mana mech for the Rogue, which is a 2/2, so that is bad usually. But the ability is at the end of your turn, give another friendly mech +2/+2. So it basically gives you the Houndmaster buff on beasts as a 2/2 minion for 3 instead of a 4/3 minion for 4. And it doesn't have the taunt either, but it's something that happens at the end of every turn. So you can at least get value the turn it comes into play, and if it is able to survive another turn, it gives you even more value. So it's basically 4/4 in terms of stats for 3 mana, which is very good. And I think this card could be very interesting. It even has some interesting synergy in a rogue deck with the Master of Disguise. For example, if you have this and you're able to then put it into stealth, it will continue to give 2/2 buffs to your friendly mechs every turn unless it is killed by sweepers. So it's something to look out for. I don't think that it's something that is going to see a whole ton of play, certainly not in the arena. It certainly could be something that would again be in a tempo rogue. It is vulnerable to Consecrate and other sweepers in general with the 2 HP, so again, it's not going to be a completely crushing card, but it's something that can really set up some early game difficulties for your opponent. Oh boy, some more anti-hand synergy here with Jeeves the Mech, a 4 mana, 1/4, which again is bad, but the ability is at the end of each player's turn, that player draws until they have 3 cards. So that means that on the turn you play Jeeves, if it was the only card you had in your hand, you immediately fill your hand with 3 cards afterwards. So that's a huge card advantage play if you are able to play Jeeves at the right time. And of course that means that Jeeves is going to be in decks that excel with a very low curve, fast-paced deck. I'm thinking things like an aggro paladin that uses Divine Favor to buff and refill your hand. Thinking of maybe things like Face Hunter that is able to burn things very quickly and then play Jeeves and put some pressure on. It's also a card that is something that maybe your opponent might want to keep. If they don't have many cards, they want to keep Jeeves alive and then they draw a few cards at the end of their turn. So it becomes an interesting card that cannot really be played in a aggro versus aggro deck situation, but it could be very good if you are playing a control or handlock deck that has a bunch of cards and cannot make use of Jeeves' Battlecry, in which it becomes a priority for them to remove, and by that time you've already had an option for an end of turn to draw cards. So I think this card is going to be very strong and constructed. I think it's going to see play. I don't think it's going to see that much play in the arena just because a 1/4 for 4 is just a very weak card in general, but if you build a deck around it, it can really give you a lot of potential to fill up your hand and dominate at that point. Here we go, another Druid mech. It's the Mech Bearcat. Mech Cat Bear? Bear Mech Cat? Whatever this creature is, it's pretty good. A 6 mana, 7/6. So it's kind of like the reversed Ogre, which of course is kind of a staple arena card, doesn't see much constructed play, but the stats itself are pretty good. The thing that makes this card interesting is it gives you a spare part card every time it takes damage. And since it has 6 attack, it probably will give you maybe one, well, it'll give you at least 1, maybe 2 spare part cards, maybe even more than that if you're able to deal with a lot of plinking and plunking that it gets to trade into a few things. But the spare parts cards are not really great. I think they're maybe worth like between 0 and 1 card, maybe a half a card in terms of what it actually can provide you. But it still gives you options, and it's something that your opponent has general ideas of what you might have, but it gives you a little bit of flavor because they might not know if you have a way to give one of your minions +1 attack or +1 health, or freeze something, or to set up a little bit of an incremental advantage at a later point for that 1 mana part. I think this card, it's hard to say again because it's a mech and because this whole expansion is going to really upheave all of the meta. But I think, again, as a standalone card, this card seems very good. I would certainly pick it in the arena, and there might be decks that will make full use of it with all the spare parts. Muster for Battle is the new Paladin spell, a 3 mana spell that summons 3 1/1 Silverhand recruits and a 1/4 weapon. So this is basically dude summoning on steroids. You get 3 right away. So yes, for 3 mana, 3 1/1s still gives you a 3/3 worth of stats. It also gives you a 1/4 weapon. So it combines a lot of the crappy mini tokens that the Paladin generally has at their disposal. But this card, I think, is actually quite strong. I think it has a lot of potential for synergy and a lot of potential to immediately grab the board and use other sort of global buff cards like a Stormwind Champion or even like a Raid Leader. It could use things like a Direwolf Alpha, things to turn those 1/1s into more value at a later point. And giving you a 1/4 weapon, while small, is still something that can help make a few minor trades if you don't have a True Silver coming up. One thing that Ben Brode had mentioned is that the Sword of Justice, the epic Paladin card, goes into effect by buffing the 1/1s before the 1/4 weapon is equipped. So if you have a few charges left of a Sword of Justice, play Muster for Battle and you get 3 2/2s, and then you get another 1/4 weapon. So that makes this card, again, it has a lot of potential. I'm really excited about this card. I can see it being used in the arena and constructed alike, and I think it's going to be pretty good. Another mech buffing card for the Warrior this time, a 4 mana 2/5 called the Screw Genk Clunker. It has a battle cry of giving a friendly mech +2/+2. So again, it's similar to the Houndmaster for the Hunter in that the Houndmaster gives things +2/+2 and taunt if it's a friendly beast. This Screw Genk Clunker is a 2/5 instead of a 4/3, which I actually think is better. I like those stat allocation much better than the 4/3 for Hunter. It's a little more defensive, but it still gives a friendly mech +2/+2 immediately, so it can allow something else to trade up. Again, hard to say with mechs how things are going to shape up with decks, but I think from the sheer stat position here, it's kind of a 4/7 in terms of stats for 4 mana, which would be amazing if it was just a simple standalone creature. And the fact that it can buff something you already have on the board means it can make something else trade up or survive a trade. big card, good card, I like it. Another card that I think is very good that fits the Control Warrior theme already is the Shieldmaiden, a 6 mana 5/5 that gives you a battle cry of gaining 5 armor. So when you think of armor in a warrior, armor is certainly more valuable than health because you can use Shield Slam, and there are other ways. If you have Alexstrasza, for example, to someone Alexstrasza's you, if they cannot get rid of your armor, it's kind of a separate thing. So it already is better than just gaining 5 health. It gives you more options as a warrior, which is something that you want. And I think this card is really exciting. I think that it's something that we would certainly see in current Control Warriors. Maybe it would allow for a more aggressive variant, or maybe even a more control variant if you want to stack this and other armor gaining cards. You can really turtle up with the Shieldmaiden. But I like it a lot. I think 6 mana for 5/5 is a little lower in terms of stats because, again, you would expect something with 6/6 or more, but that battle cry I think gives it a lot of versatility. We are now moving on to a mage minion, a 2/3 for 2 called the Snowchucker. It is a mech again, lots of mechs, and the ability is it freezes any character damaged by this minion. So it's basically the water elementals. It's a mini water elemental, kind of like a baby water elemental, and it's not as good as water elemental, but as a 2 mana 2/3, I think it's pretty good. It has a little bit of that upside. It's something that can at least help in the late game, even if you are able to lose value if something else big trades into it. Hey, at least they get frozen, and maybe they don't want to deal with it. It is also good anti-weapon tech, because if they do not deal with it right away, it can hit face, and it can freeze a weapon class like warrior or rogue, kind of hunter, paladin. So it can really do a bit of work for 2 mana, and it represents that sort of threat that I think is good. And 2/3 for 2, that's good too. Not a problem. It's okay. Okay, we have another legendary. I think this one is a little bit more underwhelming. It is Tashli, a 5/7 for 6 mana, and it has a battle cry and a death rattle, which is each time it adds a spare part into your hand. So you guarantee, unless they silence it, 2 spare parts. You're guaranteed 1 from the battle cry, and then after that, you might get another. I don't think it's worth someone silencing this for that death rattle just for a spare part, so I doubt that's going to happen very often. But again, it's kind of like the value is like 2 spare part cards, like 1 card, 1... it's okay. I don't think it's something that's going to see a lot of constructed play, just because for the 6 mana slot, there's a lot better cards out there that do more and have more impact. Again, I am not too terribly thrilled, although I wouldn't be unhappy to grab it. Next up is a Shaman 2-drop, another mech. So it seems like every class has some sort of 2-drop mech now, which is really interesting. The Whirling Zap-O-Matic. 2 mana, 3/2, Wind Fury. I think that's pretty scary. It's definitely better than the Dust Devil, which is the 1 mana 3/1 that has Overload 2, which is really painful to deal with. But I think this card could put a lot of hurt on very quickly. It's something that I could see in more Burst Shaman decks, because you can add a Flame Tongue Totem, you can add a Rock Biter to it, you could maybe buff it with Bloodlust. There's a lot of ways to make the Whirling Zap-O-Matics Wind Fury put out a lot of damage in a very short period of time, and if you're able to coin it out on turn 2 and they don't have an immediate follow-up, you're just hitting them for 6, and you could potentially hit them for 6 next turn if they don't have a taunt. It's something that can really get out of control early in terms of tempo games, becoming a big threat if someone cannot deal with it right away. Because it has 2 HP, it many times can be dealt with right away, and if you're dealing with a value situation, again, Wind Fury is not always that great because in terms of trading, it's basically a 3/2, but this is statted very well. It's a 2 mana 3/2. That's already fine, so the Wind Fury is really just a bonus on top of that to make it aggressive, and you don't feel too bad. It's not like you really get hurt with your stats. When you think of a card, the neutral card, like a Thrallmar Farseer, which is a 2/3 for 3 mana that has Wind Fury, Whirling Zap-O-Matic is just clearly much better than that. It's not even close. I think this card could see a lot of play in aggressive decks, and probably in the arena. Coining this out on turn 1 when your opponent doesn't have a 2-drop is pretty much a death sentence. It can be real tough. Alright, and now we're on the last one that I saw from very recently. It is a Hunter Legendary called Guerrilla. It is the 7 mana 6/9. It's a beast, that's always good, and the ability is crazy. Whenever this minion takes damage, you double its attack. So a 6/9 for 7 that gets its attack doubled every time it takes any sort of damage. So this card is going to be a huge threat. It also is another card that kind of leans you towards a control hunter sort of deck. If you are able to let it survive for a turn, and that is the big if, but if you do, you basically win the game if you have a deck built around it. Things like using Wild Pyromancer, things like using Arcane Shot and hitting the Guerrilla itself, trying to track for more spells, using a lot of cheap spells to get a little bit of ping damage onto it, using Elven Archer for example. There are a lot of ways to use very small cheap minions or cards to deal a little bit of damage to Guerrilla, double its attack from 6 to 12, double it again from 12 to 24, maybe even again from 24 to 48, and then it swings, and if you don't have a taunt, you lose. Up and up right there. You need to deal with Guerrilla on the turn it comes into play, or you lose. So I think this card does not really work in the current archetype of Hunter because it's more mid-range, has a little bit more early game focus and pressure on the board. But if you have a deck that is built around this sort of card, it can be a very good win condition if the opponent has already expended other answers for other cards. Saving grace, of course, for this card is just the fact that it cannot do anything on the turn it comes into play. But because it costs 7 mana instead of 8 or 9 or 10, I think that is a little less of a detriment for this card. Another thing to take into account is that if you have a Tundra Rhino and it's played the turn before Guerrilla and it's not cleared, Guerrilla has charge when it comes into play, which again, it can be a one-turn kill if they do not deal with the Tundra Rhino. So there's a few big minions that can create some good combo potential with this card. I think that doubling its attack every time is something that I don't imagine is going to stay. I think that's too strong. I think this card has the potential to be too strong. I don't know if it's always going to be too strong, but just the fact that its stats itself mean that it's going to be pretty scary. I definitely think it's something that could also see a lot of play in the arena just because a 6/9 for 7 is very difficult to deal with, and it rarely will be removed by one card. It would have to be a hard removal spell or something like that. So there you go. That is pretty much what we have right now as far as the new Goblins vs. Gnomes cards that have come out. They seem to be coming out every other day, and it's going to be happening until December. I think that they said that they are going to continue to release them until all of the cards have been released before the expansion actually comes out. So who knows when the expansion is going to come out. I think it's probably going to be late December instead of early December, but I am as excited as all of you guys. I look forward to seeing how this meta is just going to explode. I can't wait to try the arena and try a whole bunch of the different cards and see what works and what doesn't work. And hopefully you guys will have a good time seeing them too. So that is all for today. I've been Mr. Shine, and I will see you next time.